All right, and at this time we want to welcome you to Game TV. Welcome to this special broadcast of Game TV. Game TV is the media platform of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. The Grassroots Alternative Movement is a pro-democracy and political advocacy organization. Game TV comes on every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time and 10 a.m. Central Time. I am joined today in this special edition by leaders of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. Let me tell you why we are here, and then I'll bring in the leaders of this great institution so that you can hear from them. Our topic in this special edition is the U.S. 2020 report on human rights practices in Liberia. That report has been released by the U.S. State Department on Liberia. What is in this report? We are here to discuss it. And we want to let you know this is a panel discussion of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. And so if you have not shared here, I will encourage you to do so. We will tell you a little more about the Grassroots Alternative Movement before we dive into the discussion. Well, at this time, I will bring in Mr. Klobosubo Johnson Ball, who is the Vice Chairman for Administrative Services of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. Mr. Ball, welcome. A special edition. You've been here before. You know how we do it. Are you excited to be here?
Oh, very much, Anthony. I'm excited to be here, and I want to thank you for this opportunity again, to join my comrades for this kind of a discussion that will actually share some light on this report for our colleagues and other Liberians in Liberia and the diaspora to actually understand our perspective. Thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you. Let me also welcome Dr. Emmanuel Ure Yakwaglo. He is the chairman of the Grassroots Alternative Movement Liberia branch or dimension. Dr. Ure, this is a comfort zone for you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It is a pleasure to be here, sharing this platform with great men, Josiah and also Boy, and also you. To be able to discuss issues affecting our country, it is an honor, and I want to say thank you very much.
Dr. Ure Yakwaglo there, that's Dr. Emmanuel Ure Yakwaglo. He is the chairman of Grassroots Alternative Movement Liberia branch. The gentleman you're looking at on the screen is Josiah Joka. He is the chairman of the Grassroots Alternative Movement Diaspora Dimension. Joe, welcome. Another special edition. This is your favorite. How are you feeling?
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. And it's really great to be here. I'm pleased to be joined by Bo and Dr. Ure. I think it's going to be a very good conversation on the 2020 U.S. Human Rights Reports on Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Well, those who are listening to us, you might be wondering, who are these guys? What is this institution they're talking about called the Grassroots Alternative Movement? I will encourage you to visit this website, www.gameliberia.org, and you can read about us. But the leaders are here and they're going to share what the institution is all about. Let's start with Dr. Ure. He is the head of our Liberia team. Dr. Ure, is there any update that you have to share with those who probably might be seeing this institution coming live for the first time?
Again, Sonny, thank you. The Grassroots Alternative Movement is a social political movement and also economic movement established in Liberia and in the United States by Liberians and friends of Liberia with a hope to be able to change Liberia for the better. The name is Alternative, and those are some of the things we'll be talking about today. Why we coordinate the alternative? As will be pointed out in the U.S. Human Rights Report on Liberia over many years, and not just this current one, corruption, bad governance, self-centeredness, and bad governance, and just you name it. It has become the rule of the day in Liberia. So this is the alternative. The alternative to good behavior, the alternative to patriotism, the alternative to good governance. That's why we have this grassroots alternative movement established here in the United States and in Liberia, and we are here to be able to charter the course of a rightful country and a rightful citizen for the benefit of all Liberians. That's the movement. In recent time, we are making headways in Liberia. We are recruiting very heavily, bringing both men and women, young and old, on board to make sure that our ideologies are sold. We're building an institution not on any individual, not on me, not on my comrade Josiah, not anybody. We have an ideology so that if you follow our ideology, you know that moving forward, we need to change Liberia, and that's why the grassroots alternative movement is all about. If you are interested, please make sure you visit our website, www.gamliberia.org. Register there, and we'll be in touch with you. Otherwise, you can speak to us personally, and we'll be able to answer all of your questions. But I want to hand it over to my colleague Josiah to add additional information about game.
Right. Dr. Ure is quite right. And the grassroots alternative movement, like he said, is a social justice, political and advocacy institution. We are committed to establishing a just society in our country, Liberia, ensuring that we have the tenets of fair play, equality, and justice, where everyone seeking justice will be able to access justice, irrespective of their creed, their status, economic or social standing in society. Where anyone seeking education, they can have access to quality and affordable education. Where everyone seeking to establish they will have access to do so, where people's rights will be protected under the laws and no one will be above the law. This is what Game seeks. And I'm sure this is consistent with the wishes, the aspirations of the Liberian people. So Game TV is that very good platform that you need to come to be heard. This is not just about the leaders. This is about Game members, and this is about Liberians across the globe. So the opportunity is yours. As you watch and listen to us today, there's a lot that we're about to unload regarding the report and what we feel about it. That's what this panel discussion is about. We will be speaking as an institution, though from different dimensions, but get towards the same goal in terms of our opinion as an institution, our view as an institution on the U.S. State Department 2020 Human Rights Report on Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Jokai. Bob Johnson is the Vice Chairman for Administrative Services. So he's this guy, the day-to-day administrative things that happen. He's the guy who is driving those activities. But some people listening to you, before we get into the report, those of you listening, we want you to know the institution that is having this panel discussion, just in case you wish to reach out to us. Bob going to help you how to do that. And Bob, quickly, I'm set from my end here. If you are set, just dray or through a little bit. Let me share why you would like to use here quickly. But so go ahead. So this is your website. Let me put the website there, www.gameliberia.org. So if I were to go on the website, tell me, what do I need to do here?
Thank you, Anthony. And the website is actually our tools, our marketing tools that we use so that people who want to know about us can also get to know about us better.
Okay.
And it is always up there and will always be there. So if you came across the Game website and you want to know more about Game, one of the most important area that you could enter has to do with about us.
Okay.
So if you click on that about us button,
Right.
Who we are is another area that you can go, and that area will be able to tell you more about the institution. So if you just click on that and scroll down a little bit, who we are, just hit on who we are.
Okay, I did.
Yes, it will bring you to this place. There is a kind of paragraph here that I will always like to refer people to. You can know game just in one paragraph, and that is just what you are highlighting. If you read that, like Josiah was just stating, you will get to know that the grassroots alternative movement game is a social justice, political, and advocacy organization. That is the very first thing. And even as member of game, if you are introducing this institution to someone, that paragraph is one of the powerful statements that you can use to introduce this institution. And besides, if you scroll down this page, it tells you a lot about that. You see, who we are, they are rating there, the objective of the institutions are all there, where you can be relaxed and take your time, read and digest. Because the issue about ideas has to do with you seeing those ideas, reading those ideas, understanding them, dissecting them, and see as if it is something that falls within your own ethical view, background, your practices, something that has to do with an end goal. Is it the kind of change that you deserve to see in Liberia? Is it the kind of organization that you think you can be a part of? So these write-outs are all here that you can be able to follow, understand deeper, and then you can make a decision. And if you make a decision to join this organization, right here, they say join the movement. You can click on join the movement. When you get on that page, the very first thing I will urge member to always read, or Liberian to always read, has to do with our code of allegiance. That stands for our own core value, what we believe in as people, and the kind of change we intend to see. We commit ourselves to that change. If you commit yourself to a dream, you can do anything with it. You can sit with it, you can walk with it, you can sleep with it, and so that it becomes a part of you. And this is just it. If you read our Code of Allegiance and feel that game is an organization that you can contribute to, game is an organization or the platform that you can share your ideas, then you can fill in this form and submit. The moment you fill in this form and you submit it, automatically you will get a response. That's how effective this system is, and that's how organized this organization is. I don't want to take up much of your time, but the website is there. You can always visit the website. All of our legal documents that you need to understand, that you need to read to understand the institution and its structures are all there. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Mr. Klobosubo Johnson Ball, the Vice Chairman for Administrative Services of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. He is the administrator who doing all the paperwork. So if you have questions, he's the guy to talk to. But you can also talk to me too. They call me the CSO. I don't know what they mean by CSO, but hey, the CSO is the Chief Secretarial Officer. So I can do small talking too, just in case you have some questions. But most of your questions will be answered on that website. But should you need more information, numbers, email addresses are all there, and you can use those tools to get to us. We will be more than glad to answer your question. Gentlemen, thank you for giving our audience a little bit about the institution, but you are here for a task. There is a report about our dear country, Liberia, the country for which you came together and said there must be a platform, there must be an institution. All right. So there is a report about this country, and that is why we are here. And so those of you who are here, this is a panel discussion of the Grassroots Alternative Movement on the U.S. 2020 report on human rights practices in Liberia. The leaders are here to discuss. We're going into it right now. We don't want to waste your time anymore. Gentlemen, let me see. What I want to do here is, what is the general overview of this report compared to previous report? And this time I will start with Josiah Jokai to give us that, and Dr. Yuri will come in to historicize it a little more. So, Joe, let's start with you. What's the general overview? Is there a routine report? What is it all about? What do we need to know about this report?
Right. The U.S. 2020 Human Rights Report is consistent with the U.S. State Department approach to making sure that it contributes to the establishment, growth, and development of democracy across the globe, and particularly so in sub-Saharan Africa. The U.S. State Department publishes regular reports about governance issues, challenges, and progress over the period. So the 2020 report is consistent with that commitment of the U.S. government. That report is routine because it is something that the U.S. State Department produces and publishes regularly. What is in the report, I will say, is damning. It reflects some of the issues that have been flagged before in previous reports. When you highlight issue of arbitrariness, killings, tortures, in the 21st century, those are not vices that should appear to be a vicious cycle in a particular country that has become entrenched. It is something that a country or a government in this modern time should be able to move away from, considering the issue of equity, in all spheres, making sure that people's rights are protected. People have the freedom of freedom of speech, the protection of children, protection of women and girls, vulnerable communities. These are all guaranteed, by different conventions, international conventions, various laws in different countries. It's guaranteed by their constitutions. So it is something that the United States government try to ensure that it highlights as a way of helping other governments to address issues that they face, that they are confronted or challenged by. And Liberia is no exception. That is why the report is regular. That is why it's routine. But the report should be different. We should be having different versions. At this time, we should not be having the same issues that we had last year in the report. Many of those issues are reflected in this report. The issue about deficits and inefficiencies in government agencies and ministries that are affecting the operations of the government. The issue of corruption that is being reflected and discussed in an endemic manner. So those are the things that characterize the report. And that's why I say the report slams the government. And it is a serious call that nobody should, underestimate in terms of what happens next. So I think that is just a broader picture of what the report is. But as we discussed, into specific, that we will be able to flag more issues on each of those thematic areas.
Thank you, Joe. Let me bring in Dr. Emmanuel Ure Yakwalo. Give us a little history, for us to get a better understanding of how bad this report is. We also need to know what has been captured in previous reports. That way we get a, kind of comparative analysis of how it has been. So give us some history here on this report.
Wonderful. And Sonia, thank you very much. And thank you very much to Josiah for laying the foundation. I just want to add to Josiah also to say that sometimes our ways not seem to be right. It has to be evaluated. So there are several international evaluations that take place. One of those is the Human Development Index. Is a measurement as to how advanced a country is. This is just one form that the U.S. government is trying to do. We might be in Liberia, we'll be operating by ourselves, but it's good for an independent extended institution to study what we're doing and give their opinion about it based upon the fact they gathered. And one of those is the U.S. Human Rights Report. We cannot overlook the report because the report is done scientifically, factually presented. So what in the report are factual. Having said that, The government of Liberia, the George Weah administration recently issued a statement in acceptance of the report. They stated that, yes, we are faced with a problem, but these are systemic problems. I want to start to say, yes, I agree, it is the problems are systemic. And that's what I'll talk about shortly. I think what I disagree with is if it is systemic and you promise to change it, we hold you accountable to change it, right? We can't just say it's systemic and then so we'll continue to be in it. Particularly, we took a report, the U.S. Human Rights Report in 1998. 1998 is chosen because this is the time Charles Taylor is elected president in 1997. 1998, we had a little bit of stability, right? The report, it highlight the issue of a suppression of freedom of speech, extrajudicial killing, corruption, impunity, all the other thing is mentioned in that report. Then we took another one from 2011 to assess the Ellen Johnson administration, how the report was structured at that point. This is now not Charles Taylor, but it's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf after almost nearing at the term of her first tenure in office. And then the same thing repeat. They have freedom of speech being suppressed. There are impunity. There are extrajudicial killing. There are just a lot of bad things happening in Liberia. And then we compare it to 2020 report on the George Weah administration, and we see the same thing repeating. The problem associated with this is if we cannot learn from the past, if our leaders cannot take this report and study it and say, what can we do differently? And continue to repeat the same thing that have been done year in, year out, we are heading nowhere. That's the point we're trying to make. To say that this is not the first time the U.S. government, the State Department is issuing reports on Liberia. If the Weah administration argue that it's systemic, I agree with them that it's systemic. Therefore, when they cannot make the change, all right, the promise was change for hope. We're going to come and make a change. And so we expect the changes to take place. It can be systemic and historical, and it will continue to be that way. Then, if it is that way, we say the changes have not taken place and we headed nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Folks, you are watching Game TV. It's the media platform of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. A member of that movement just joined in. He is Mr. Cisse Goya. He's a proud member of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. Mr. Goya, welcome and thanks for joining us. We have to discuss the report, and he is a diaspora member of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. He must share something in common. We are in Minnesota. We are Minnesotan. Welcome, brother.
I appreciate it, and sorry for coming up late, man. Daddy duties have me in the background doing some other work, so thank you for having me.
Okay, and so as you are aware, we are discussing the U.S. 2020 report on Liberia, talking about human rights practices there. And actually, we were discussing on the general overview. I mean, this report, what is it saying? What can we learn from this report? What is the goal of this report? How should nations that the report is written, but we're talking about Liberia in particular here, how should our government see the report? How should they read it? What should they take from it? What can they do about it? That's what we want to know.
So I came in and I was listening to the professor, the doctor. I'm giving a historical analysis and going back to previous governments, because it's a good thing when you want to make comparison to know at least have a benchmark or have a base point to say, okay, from here to here, look at what we did and look at what we have. But to the greater point of how should we look at the report, is I think we have a very bad way of reading and reacting to reports in Liberia. Typical example, the report card your students get from school. The report card is intended to transmit a message from the instructor to you, the parents or guardians, about your child. And it's an instruction. It is intended to be a guide for you to talk to your child or your ward and say, look, I see you're not excelling, you're not performing as you should be in this subject or in this place. What can I do as your guardian? What are the struggles you are having? How can we make sure we get past this? Instead, what we do typically in the Liberian context, because we're talking about Liberia, is we shame the child, or worst case scenario, we say, "What are your business? You want land? Then I will not be here forever. What are your business, right?" And we put it aside. We don't look at it as a tool to be able to help on how we move forward. So look at the human rights report, and everybody has become tribal over it, right? The ruling establishment has become tribal. They interpreting it as systemic, which is really, really, really illogical to look at things from that perspective, especially when you ran on a platform and a mantra that you could do it better, that you could fix it, right, and that you were the best president since 1847. Yet you're telling us that this is systemic, right? And then of course the opposition is going into also its own corner, right? Instead of providing prescriptions on how do we get from where we have the report now. Your child is making a D or an F in math. How do we move on, right? What are you going to get a study class teacher? What are you going to do? Those are the pieces that are lacking because we're very quick and very easy to go tribal and sit in our own corners and throw rocks at one another. But I think the report is damning. Nobody can take anything happy out of there. Not the George we are government, not the opposition, not any Liberian can take anything out of it. But there's nothing wrong in the report. Everything in that report is factual. And here's one thing I want to point out here, Anthony, before I stop, is that report does not even cover all of 2020. As damning as it is, it does not cover all of 2020. And we know there's a lot of other horrible things that happened in 2020.
Thank you so very much. That is Cisse Goya, a proud member of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. And by the way, he is our expert on education. He is a proud public school teacher. Gentlemen, let's continue the conversation. So now that we have gotten the general overview of this report, the report came from somebody, the U.S. government. And, so the question that we want you to answer is the U.S. in any moral standing to be listened to for excesses on human rights abusing? Because there's the general notion that, well, what is America too? There are things going on there, and then they're talking about Liberia. So what is different here to another extent for which the U.S. Should be taken serious, reporting on these excesses in Liberia? And again, this time we're going to start with Bob Johnson.
Thank you, Anthony. That's a very good question. And sometimes when this kind of questions come out, people try to look at it from different perspective. But this question is trying to tell you that there are vast difference and they have reasons to actually come up with this kind of report as a yardstick. In the U.S., it's not that crime is not being committed in the U.S., but there are systems put in place. So you can be the prince of will, and you got to the U.S. and you committed a crime, the system going to follow you. So, but where are the systems we have in our own country? So it's not just about U.S. has a moral standing to be listened to because they have systems in place. Nobody bypasses those systems. When you commit crime, you are invited. And if you are found guilty, you pay the price. But let's go back to Liberia. Let's look at the prison system. A system that was set up in Monrovia Central Prison that has a capacity of 374 detainees. That's the capacity of that prison center. And if a government can have 2,572 prisoners in that facility, it's 6 times the capacity. 6 times the capacity. And this is consistent from even the 1998 report that Dr. Euro was just looking at. It is consistent with the 2010 report doing Madam Salif, Iraq. Yet, it is still consistent in George Weah administration. When we are talking about alternative, we are talking about evidence-based alternative. What am I saying this? If you know that a capacity of 374 detainees supposed to be in a particular facility, and you inherited a government that have this bad human rights record, what can you do? This is a baseline. Right here is a baseline data to measure what impact you as a government can do to actually alleviate such a problem. If the capacity of the prison is 374, you have 2,572 people in there. What can you do? Do you have to decentralize the prison system? Do you have to actually, or reconstruct new facilities? These are questions that need to be asked. It's not that the government does not have funding to do so, but they just want to ignore it. And then when the report comes, they pick and choose. Oh, we never had some, at least the records show that we don't have political prisoners. So what? Because you don't have political prisoners, then it means you have done good? You have done nothing. This is what we're trying to say. So in the US, there are systems set in place that look at these issues. So these reports are there to serve as yardstick for us leaders, for us citizens, to measure our government success. So people are supposed to be looking at these strategic areas. What can the government do to actually make sure that the issue of prisoners in this prison system can be addressed? I want to stop that far and give time to other colleagues to actually speak on the issue.
Yeah, Joel, let me bring you in here. The issue of whether or not the U.S. is in a moral place to be giving a report sometimes becomes debatable. What is your take? How do you see it?
Absolutely. The United States has the moral rectitude, the moral standing to be able to question what's going on in places like Liberia and other sub-Saharan African countries. The United States is an enviable democracy. Their democracy is powerful indeed, and it is guaranteed by their laws. It is respected by government officials and the citizenry of the country. Mm-hmm. So here, people have access to justice. People have access to economic opportunities. People have access to education, affordable education, quality education. People have access to services in this country. People have room for redress. Here, the justice system works. And as I said, America's democracy is strengthened by her institutions. Here, it is not about how strong the individual or the leader is. It is about the power of the institutions, which matters in the dispensation of justice. So the United States has the standing to be able to take stock and publish those stock reports that will help other governments, such as the case of Liberia. It's just about taking stock for the period under review. What has the government done right? What has the government done wrong? Looking at the different spheres. That's why it talks about the agencies, inefficiencies, deficiencies in those agencies, because the strength of those agencies and cooperation will determine the strength of the government in terms of its overall performance. Yeah. It talks about justice, dispensation of justice. It took stock on the economy. It talks about all of the important aspects of governance. And so it is an assistance to the government and the Liberian people to be able to call the attention of the government to the issues that it has and steps that can be taken to address those issues. That brings me to my comrade Cesar Goya's own statement that he made. The report is damning, like I said from the outset, and he indicated that the report should be able to help the government and help opposition to be able to come up with suggestions or recommendations as to how to deal with the issues that are flagged in the report. But our reaction has always been from a negative perspective. Opposition, government is always negative. The government will always take a defensive posture. The opposition will see it as, a platform for celebration, and something to gain a political capital from. And in Liberia, if you even want to consider that as a means of gaining a political dividend, is going to be a little bit difficult because the voters in Liberia are not inclined to understand basic reports of that nature and make a voting decision per that. They vote for different reasons. They vote based on tribal connections. They vote based on party affiliations. They vote based on family connections, not on these reports or these actions that are supposed to be determined, that's supposed to help to determine their votes. No, we are not there yet when it comes to that. So opposition should not be, having a victory lap when reports like this come up. What they need to do is go in their closet as an institution, review the report, evaluate it, come up with recommendations, and present a recommendation to the government and publish it and make it known. That's what they need to do. But it's the contrary that we have. The government on the other end is very defensive, coming out with issues that don't even exist and are very unnecessary. Talking about this is consistent with the governance ecosystem of our country for decades. That is absolutely unnecessary. If you don't, that's not even a response from the government. The government should be taking each of those thematic areas of the report and speaking to them realistically. You have to be fair because the report is factual. The information in there is correct. They are cross-checked 1 million times before they are even published. So this talk is to help Liberia. But unfortunately, our negative perception that we are consumed by always present our reactions so negatively. And that is the issue we are having. The issue of torture is true. There are instances. They talk about Zanu Miller in the report, how he was tortured and died at the end of the day. The issue of police brutality by the report is clear. The issue of not having people assemble freely and express their views about the governance system is clear in the report with instances. The issue of people getting missing, not just ordinary citizens, professional Liberians who are supposed to be providing services for the Liberian people, they're getting missing all the time.
Yes.
All the time. And there is no accountability for that. You are having kids that are also getting missing. There are rape cases across the country that are being reported regularly by civil society institutions. This is not the United States government accusing you. This is the United States government telling you this is what is happening to your people. You need to take certain actions to address these issues. That's what the US government is telling us. And then we are there on the defensive, something that we're doing wrong, and we're not pointing it, we're not saying it to our people. When the government takes stock by the president going to report to the Capitol, to the legislature, the government does not highlight these critical issues. That's the deception. Somebody from outside telling you that these are the real issues that you're supposed to be telling your people that are confronting you. This is how you need to address the economic situation in your country so that you can lift your people from poverty. And then you want to be defensive about that? Something has to be wrong with you. Probably you got to be from Mars.
Thank you.
So the U.S. has the right to be able to publish the report from the stock it took. And it's not just about Liberia. There are other countries that it also publishes reports on. And they take it in good faith. They take the necessary steps to address those issues. And that is what we need to do. Opposition doesn't have to take a victory lap. Opposition needs to recommend. The government doesn't have to be defensive. Government needs to take actions because that's a commitment it made to the Liberian people that, yeah, this thing has been endemic. Corruption has been endemic. It's a scourge. It's something that's affected, deeply rooted, but we are committed to changes. That's the commitment that we are the government made, that we will change it. So let them change it and start being defensive.
Thank you so very much, Joe. Talking about government-owned response to this report, I will bring in Dr. Ure. Dr. Ure, I know we're chatting briefly about the government response, and more like saying, oh, yeah, we did this thing, or this thing happened. But what's the big deal, right? Because it's happened before. I want you to throw a light, on the government response to the report when they had the opportunity to do so.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sonny. And everything that Josiah said, he said it right. And I agree with every single word that he said, definitely. Just before the government responded, I want to go back on that question whether the United States has the moral ground to issue this type of report. I say emphatically, yes, the United States does have the right and the responsibility to do so. Why? Because the U.S. is the father of democracy. All right, we have democracy in Liberia. The U.S. government is the father, and they learn how to live by their laws. Right. In addition to that, they spend a lot of money in places like Liberia. Right. Our current electricity is ongoing. When we're fighting war, or United States please help, they help to end the war. They help to build the military. They help to build. So not only that, they have the moral obligation because the U.S. taxpayers, we enjoy it too. They send it to us a lot. And so for that reason, if we are making mistakes, if our leaders are making mistakes, they have the moral authority to analyze the issue and tell us what you are doing is wrong. So those who think that the U.S. does not have the moral authority to do so, they are in the opposite direction. The U.S. has the responsibility and the moral obligation to do that. It is left with us now to see how best we can use it to the benefit of ourselves instead of us being defensive. The WIA administration issued a statement, which I summarized earlier. My comrade also alluded to that, to say that, yes, they didn't really deny the report. They didn't say this is not true. But the argument is systemic. It's been going on for a long time. That is not an answer to this report. The answer would have been, this is true. This is what we're going to do next. All right. There have been killing going on. We're going to ensure that the next report will not report on extrajudicial killing. Right? There are impunities going on. People are being corrupted all over the place. We're going to make sure the next time, say we are at this point, this percentage of corruption, by next year, we're going to drop to the percentage. We're going to make sure. We're going to take steps. I'll give an example. I may not have been born at that time, but there was this thing about Boyo business in Liberia. The story says President Todba, some of his relatives, right? He hanged them. He killed them because they were involved into Boyo business from somewhere in Maryland. And people who were in Liberia, they say Boyo business drop flat. And this is the kind of decision we want from the administration. Tell us exactly what you're going to do next. Take concrete action. And you've been the example of that action, right? He who has dirty hands cannot bathe another person. Your hands are dirty, you cannot bathe another person. Set a clear example. Tell us that you are clean, and then help to bathe the other people. So I think the response, the response we got is weak. It's not a response. We expect a better response. A response that clearly said this is true, but this is how we're going to address it. Be clear about it, not because it has always happened. And because what? That's why you are elected. It has always happened. So you say you're going to change it. If you don't change it, you don't have integrity, right? Integrity is doing what you say you will do, isn't it? If you don't do what you say you're going to do, you don't have integrity. That's not that simple. And then so that if you don't live up to your promises, you don't have integrity. Thank you.
All right, let me bring in Comrade Cisse Goya. Cisse, you and myself live in Minnesota. I don't want to make this about the issue of George Floyd, how he was murdered. And I don't want to talk about.
I knew you were going to go there. And these Minnesota guys are going to kill us with this Minnesota thing.
We are proud of our state here. And I don't also want to make it about the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol that was fueled by President Trump. And despite these excesses that we see on a daily basis, police brutality on Black in the United States, but we see investigation, we see all these things, and the question lingers, is the U.S. in a moral standing here to talk about SSA in Liberia?
So being a Minnesotan, being a teacher, being one of those people that was close to that, I took my students there. I went there to protest during his memorial and everything. Yes, the U.S. does have human rights issues, But if the question is, does the U.S. have the moral authority to come up with this report? I would say absolutely yes. Because the report is not only issue for external consumption. There are also reports that are issued about states and so they hold even their own states accountable, right? There have been these reports that come up from the Justice Department that talks about when Ferguson happened, right? With Freddie Brown. When that's the reason some of these police departments, some of these states were under censorship and were under investigation supervision by the Justice Department. Right? That's the reason when you pass civil rights legislation, there were certain states that weren't allowed to pass any electoral reform legislation that didn't go through the Justice Department because they felt that those states had done wrong racially, and so they weren't allowed to make those changes. So the U.S. is not just making this judgment and it's just reflecting outward. There are also these judgments that are made internally, and anybody who's able to reflect on themselves, I say yes, have the authority to be able to reflect externally. So having said that, look, in the U.S., yes, we do have these things happen, but in the U.S., you have investigations that get carried out. The former President Trump was in office when the Southern District of New York was investigating him.
Yes.
Right? He's a sitting president, and he has people investigating him.
Yes.
Right? His campaign manager was found guilty and sent to jail. Right? His national security advisor pleaded guilty and was waiting to be sent to jail. So there is impunity in America, but
and sister, I don't mean to interrupt you. His personal lawyer is in jail.
There you go. There are congressmen. There are cases of congressmen and senators and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that have gone to jail in this country. Matt Gaetz, one of the former president's loudest speakers right now, is under investigation. A certain congressman is under investigation for alleged child trafficking. Right? So yes, the U.S. does have. Look, here's one thing that really bothers me about the response of the government when they talk about the ecosystem. I think that's disrespectful. I think that's very disrespectful to the Liberian people. For somebody to say that there are extrajudicial killings taking place, that there are people being murdered, that there's torture, you say, well, that's in our ecosystem. It is sending the message that Liberians, by nature, by our DNA, we are predisposed to torturing our own. We are predisposed to murdering our own with impunity. I think that was a disrespectful response from the government. Let's just call it what it is, right? Because they're not telling you, the report was not from 1847 to now. Because if the report was about 1847 to now, you go, whoa, yeah, it happened on other people before and it's not us. They're telling you this is what has been happening within your term of reference. And the piece about, when they say, oh yeah, at least we don't have any political prisoner in prison, it's kind of akin to me, like, when you send a report card home and the kid has all F's, in Liberia, you take 13 subject. Everything I read, then you get one place where you say, you start celebrating, at least he failed out one class. Well, it's an incomplete. You can't celebrate that, right? It's the piece with, you feel all of these pieces, they go, well, at least we don't have any political prisoners, but that is not something to celebrate. And besides that, why don't you have political prisoners? Well, it's because those prisoners ran away. Henry Costa is a case. He would have been a political prisoner had he stayed, right? Yeke Koluba, when remember the June demonstration when they put guns in his car and they wanted to arrest him and take him to jail. Remember that? That the people had to stand because he would have been a political prisoner. Mo Ali, the most recent one, right, would have been a political prisoner. So you don't have political prisoner because you don't know how to do political prisonership. But that's not something to argue about. That is not something to hang your heart on. Look, we look at the judiciary. For me, what bothers me the most is the lack of an independence in the judiciary. Just look at the most glaring example recently. Just within the executive. You have a police director asking for somebody to appear, to have a discussion. And the person tells you they're not coming because they have reason. And then the Solicitor General declares that person wanted. Right? And then the person goes to the police station and without any charges, you say, okay, he has to go because there are a group of people. And the next time he goes by, you'll keep him without any charges. And then the chief law enforcement officer, the justice minister, says, release the man, let him go. and the police director refuses. So you are telling me that that is also within our ecosystem, that you don't know what the functions are, even within the judicial, even within the executive. But look at the judiciary, right? A case in point, Isaac Jackson. Isaac Jackson sued the Weir government because they terminated his tenure position. The Supreme Court agreed. The Weir government refused to pay Isaac Jackson for over 3 years. The Supreme Court, in its first ruling, said that the party should return to status quo ante. It means go back to where you were before this whole thing started. The Weir government refused to issue this brother a passport. A Liberian citizen was refused a Liberian passport. He means, even though the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in this sitting has said that the Liberian government was wrong and that they should issue him a passport. He sends his relative to the Foreign Affairs, and Foreign Affairs refuses. So that is not an independent judiciary, right? So you tell me next time, would I take the rulings of the Supreme Court seriously? Look at the case of Brownie Samukai, right? Yeah, we can agree that Brownie Samukai has some, questionable stuff, but the Supreme Court came down with a ruling and sent a mandate to NEC, only for the Solicitor General to come back and say, well, you know what, don't do it. And what has happened? Nothing. So you can't tell me that's within our ecosystem. I think that was disrespectful to the Liberian people. The Liberian government responded that way.
Thank you so very much, Cisse Goya. Folks in cyberspace, you are watching Game TV. Game TV is the media platform of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. This is a panel discussion of the Grassroots Alternative Movement on the U.S. 2020 report on Liberia human rights practices or human rights excesses in Liberia. And if you have just joined, or we want to say welcome, and please share the show, because this discussion, we are now getting ready to go into the meat of the report, abuses that have been captured in that report. The panelists will be able to touch on them and explain them one by one. But before we do that, we're going to take a very short break. And those of you following us, we will also find time to read your comments. So don't go anywhere. We are just getting started on this report. We will take a very short break and we will be right back. Stay tuned, folks. All right, folks, we are back with you, and thanks for staying tuned here. We want to remind you, this is Game TV, the media platform of the Grassroots Alternative Movement, and we are discussing the U.S. 2020 report on Liberia concerning human rights abuses. In this panel discussion, I have leaders of the Grassroots Alternative Movement present that you see Mr. Cisse Goya. We also have Mr. Boyd Johnson. We have Josiah Joka, and we also have Dr. Emmanuel Yakwawo. Welcome, and stay tuned as we continue our conversation here. Gentlemen, let's try to go into the meat of it now. Let's start with the issue of press freedom, or freedom as a whole, including press and assembly and all of that. And on that, I will start with Josiah. Josiah, the report, squarely cover most of the abuses that happen in Liberia on freedom of speech, of press, and all that. What all that you remember that they could capture, and please explain to our listeners what they all say about our country, Liberia.
Okay, so our laws guarantee freedom of speech of the individual Liberian, and also as a collection of people. It could be an organization, an institution, or whatsoever. There are also international benchmarks, other conventions that also guarantee freedom of speech. There is also freedom of the press, making sure that media institutions operate freely in the country, consistent with the laws under which they operate. There must not be interferences in a way that hamper their operations, because the people need to be informed about the activities of their government, informed about issues that affect them. So press freedom has to be guaranteed in that respect. Freedom of speech has to be guaranteed. And Liberia, as a democracy, that is a practice that must go on unhindered. But during the period under review, the report also took stock of that and highlighted some instances. The report talked about Zanu Mela. That's one of the instances that stands out. Zanu Mela was tortured. He's a journalist. And from there, he complained about all of the issues he had. The government did not take any action. He was tortured by a police officer. Government did not take any action to address the issue. Zanu Mela died as a result of that. You have the issue of the closure of Heron Costa's station. And what they did, they took all of the equipment and everything. That was even criminal. People should have been prosecuted for that action. That was totally unacceptable. Those are classic examples of some of the issues that are hindering press freedom in the country. You have the media institution that Patrick Horner, a journalist, a renowned journalist, is trying to establish in the country. That has never been registered. But other pro-government media organizations, they just get free passes all the time. They get free passes. That media institution has never been registered, has been denied registration. So the issue of press freedom is glaring. That is why we said the report is factual. The issues laid out in the report are clear. You have the issue of freedom of speech. As Liberians mobilize in keeping with their constitution, because power is inherent in them, they have the right to assemble whenever they deem it necessary, to hold their government accountable when they deem it necessary, to institute a government and utter sin. It's in keeping with their own laws, their own constitution. But that is being violated. During the period under review, it was grossly violated. There were a number of instances Liberian citizens tried to get up, to protest, to call on their own government to address the issues they are confronted by, economic issues, social issues. Government used excessive force, using hard water cannons on their own people, tear gas in an arbitrary way, outside of established standards, security standards. So the report is clear about that. And as we have said, everyone here has said, my colleagues have said, that the government needs to speak to each component of the report, accept the report, and be able to convince the Liberian people that these are the steps they are going to take to address these issues. Up to now, I think that response from the government should not be considered by anyone as a response. Like Dr. Ure said, it's not a response, it's not an answer. It should be disregarded. And like Cesar Goya said in his own words, it's a disrespect to the Liberian people, absolutely. So if you have been killing your own people for more than a century and a half, so you should continue to kill them, because it's something that you think they're worth dying. Somebody is telling you no, it's wrong. So press freedom and freedom of speech are choked in Liberia. We don't have it. It's not working. It's not applicable. For the period under review, it has not worked. And I think it's an issue that the government needs to look at seriously. But let me tell you another dimension of this report, since I have the opportunity.
Yeah.
This report comes on the margins of, the position made by Chris, the representative, the Republican representative of the 4th Congressional District of New Jersey. And Chris' comments are not different from those issues highlighted by the report. Chris talked about deteriorating and worsening political situation in the country. It's true. There is incoherence in the political system. There is incoherence in the governance system. You don't find coordination that brings about effectiveness and efficiency. No. It's deteriorating. The system is deteriorating. The human rights issues highlighted, he talked about them. The civil rights issue highlighted, he talked about them. The political issues, he talked about them. He talked about corruption that is endemic. And he made a position in a slimy manner. So the point I'm trying to make is that Chris did not just make this in isolation. He is making this from the perspective of the Meniskiite. And you know, the Meniskiite historically is named after Sergei Meniski, a then Russian accountant who was tortured, beaten, jailed, and he died in jail. And so that happened in 2009 in Russia, in Moscow. And so the United States government decided, the United States government is the beacon of hope when it comes to good governance. And it decided that it will act consistent with that. An act was passed by the House, and the Senate concurred with the House in 2012. That act is called the Magnitsky Act. That Magnitsky Act authorizes the United States government to take action against corrupt governments globally. Mind you, if the Magnitsky Act is invoked, it's not going to be about Representative Smith, Chris Smith, whether he's been voting, to support social justice in America and other places. It's going to be about delivering justice to Liberia and other countries who are supposed to benefit. So if that act is invoked because of this report and the position of Chris Smith, which is consistent with the report, then people should look out for that, because that is highly possible. So I just wanted to draw that analogy. The fact that they are both coming, at the same time, it is something important for us to look at as we delve into this conversation. But the issue of press freedom and freedom of speech in Liberia, it is not working as highlighted by the report. And the unfortunate thing is that the government did not even mention anything about it specifically, which is important, because press freedom and freedom of speech should be able to guarantee the rights of the people. If the people are able to express themselves freely without being affected, it is very important for the growth of any democracy, especially an embryonic one like ours. If there are media institutions that are allowed to operate freely in the country to promote peace, to promote, civil rights, to promote economic activities, growth and development, that contributes to our recovery and development process. But what we have is the contrary.
Thank you so very much. Let me bring in Mr. Global Super Ball Johnson. Johnson Ball. Mr. Ball, we're talking about freedom, press, assembly. And before you can come in, let me share with you in this report on the issue of peaceful assembly, something they said that I disagree with. That is that the government of Liberia, some way, somehow, was open to freedom or assembly, talking about protest. And that is the one thing that I disagree with strongly in the report. And here's my reason. The June 7 protest, we saw the display of military strength that the Liberian government actually does not have. The goal was to intimidate our people not to come out to protest. They needed not to do that. If you see the right to assemble peacefully as something guaranteed under the Constitution, allow the people to do that and not trying to show some military muscle, so as to discourage or intimidate people. That's one. And why every time they have to emphasize this permit thing, and not only that, The UN has to come in, ECOWAS has to come in, even the US embassy has to come in to negotiate a date and time and where. That doesn't happen here, except for Liberia. And so to have said that, well, some way, somehow they were open to peaceful assembly, I don't think so. And let me add, when the nurses gathered something, or Sise Goya, remember it was raining, the nurses were in the rain at JFK. And then later on, there was another one. What did the government say? That if you don't go back to work, if you have to protest, we will replace you with trainees. So how could the report say somewhere, somehow they were, open to peaceful assembly? That I disagree with in the entire report as I read it. But it's your time to speak on the issue of freedom.
I just want to crack a joke.
Okay, do that.
That all of these things happening in Liberia is part of our ecosystem.
And so we should just let it be.
Part of our ecosystem. So when you go demonstrate or peaceful protest while you're not at work, we will replace you, because that's how we've been doing it. That's an old age things. I just want to not just look at the issue of freedom of press, but look at issues strategically. What I will be looking at from this report is to let the Liberians public know that this is a baseline data for us. Somebody did a research for us. They told us all of the problems that are happening across our governance system. Something you should have done yourself to inform your good governance system. You never did it. Somebody did it for you. And by far, the government should be appreciative that someone can use a scorecard against them to show them their shortcoming. And what we expect now is an action plan. We expect the justice system to come up with a comprehensive action plan. That's what is used in the UN system for conflict and post-conflict, states. When you are fighting war and cutting people's hands and cutting people's legs, we put you on the list, on the UN list. And the UN mandate you to follow an action plan. And you have a timeline to address those issues. Liberia is not on that list. Which doesn't mean that we are doing good, but it means that we have an opportunity to address a lot of these issues that have been pointed out. You should have been doing this yourself as the government. What is wrong? What did we, inherit? What are the past country profile, country reports that we need to look at to help our governance system? Those reports have been there, but this is the most recent one. So let's forget about the decade-old report, 10 years ago, maybe 2010 Human Rights Report. This one is fresh and new. The most recent data that have been gathered. You have it in your hands. That is a sophisticated tool that you can use to put your governance system in place, because you know the problem right now. What can this government do to come up with an action plan that will take each of these issues and dissect them into a kind of solvable, steps? Now look at freedom of press, freedom of the press. Like my brother said, the judicial system is not set. Before people go to peaceful demonstration, the justice ministry gave you a permit and all of these things. They should assign you security to protect you. Not to be whipping you and tear gassing you all over the place. That's not the purpose for the assigned security to that protest group. They should be there to protect you so that you feel relaxed and come up with the issues that you want to present the government. You are protected. That's what happened in the rest of the world. And because it's a standardized system in the rest of the world, we in Liberia look at it different. Look at what the minister was saying. The people are judging us by their international human rights standard. Oh, they are judging you by their international human rights standard. What's your standard? Take that report and put it in your own standard. So maybe their standard is over exaggerating when we see the reality on a daily basis in this country. But what's your standard? Maybe you have not, signed up to any of the legal protocols, and systems around the world. So you have your own standard. Incorporate this report into your own standard and tell us what are the action plans you have on the issue of free press, on the issue of free assembly. Are you going to now create some awareness with your police system, of your security system, to tell them that when people are conducting peaceful demonstration, you're supposed to be there to protect them, than to harm them? Is that part of your action plan? Are you going to start whipping journalists when you can come on once in the blue moon to address nation about your success? And there are ills in the society that the Liberian people are supposed to be aware of. These journalists have to cover these stories before it can be aired. And somebody come around and see you brutalizing someone in the street. They want to cover a story about that. You are whipping them, taking the equipment from them to an extent that people are even dying in the system. But yet you are saying that people are judging you by international standard. So let's look at your standard. Let's look at the prison system and all of those other stuff. We think our government should be able to set in place an action plan that will be telling them how they are going to address each of these issues that have been highlighted by this report and going forward, so that the Liberian people can be informed. A process that can be put in place and what have you. And there are so many different ways that you do it. In some country, if you know that one ministry cannot solve this problem, it's a huge, you set up a task force. And that task force will be able to set up various steering committee. They will be able to set up working groups. They will be able to invite international organizations that has programs to address those issues to become member of those groups. And then the government come in with funding that they can afford, or maybe come up with a trust fund that will be separate, a program under the executive branch of government that will be able to help, so that the government carry on its normal activity that it says is going to deliver. But these ills in the society has been addressed by a task force. It's easy. It's a plan. When you put those things into place, those international and bilateral organizations in Liberia that have budget in those areas, they support your plan because you have a plan that they believe it can work. You have a plan that they have been a part of, and they all help to set up those benchmarks that are necessary to be reached. That's how you address this kind of thing. We expected the government to have come up with a kind of analysis of the report and tell all their next steps, which was going to help everybody in that country and say, oh yes, I think this government means business. But you come back to tell us that this is part of our ecosystem. But yet you promise us that you're coming to change these things that are happening. So are you contradicting yourself? Or was just that a political statement so that you get into power and become the same old thing, like you putting new wine in old bottle or old wine in new bottle? Is this the same kind of system that we are trying to follow? This is why we are saying game is an alternative. Game is an alternative. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. And gentlemen, let me read something from the report talking about the freedom here. And then, the Liberian government passed the Adulai Kentama law. Joka is familiar with that. Sese Goya is familiar, and Dr. Ure as well. Talking about label. Let me read this, gentlemen. Label slander laws. In February 2019, criminal label and slander laws were repealed with the passage of the Kamara Adulai Kamara Act of Press Freedom. Nevertheless, government officials occasionally use the threat of civil suits to intimidate critics. In April of 2019, Minister of State for Presidential Affairs Nathaniel Magay filed a $500,000 defamation suit against Root FN and its radio hosts Henry Costa and Fidel Selly, alleging the two radio personalities slander, badmouth, vandalize, and vilify McGill by accusing him of financial impropriety. Both the Media Foundation for West Africa and Center for Media Studies and Peacebuilding urged Minister McGill to withdraw the suit, which was later dropped. Now stopping there, in July, Sano County Senator J. Milton Tiaje filed a $4.7 million labor suit against Front Page Africa newspaper for publishing an investigation alleging that Milton Tiaje received 20,000 bribes to confirm Austin Dubusi Mwambodike as the chairperson of the National Election Commission. A recalling also emerged in which a voice allegedly belonging to Tiaje stated that he expected the nominees he confirmed to give job to to one or two of his recommended applicants. Gentlemen, that is just a short piece of what is in the report. This is our government that passed this law that, hey, no labor, nothing. And then the very officials who are taking credit for a law they passed are the one using the very law to go after media personalities. Dr. Ure.
That is the whole point. The whole point is not enforcing laws that you make. A difference between Liberia and the United States, a difference between Liberia and places like Ghana and other countries. Mm-hmm. You have a law and then you honor your own law, right? You have the law, the law is unenforceable. You don't enforce the law. Well, a law that is not enforced is create a situation as if there is no law. Why you made the law in the first place if you're not going to enforce it, right? Laws are made to guide our interaction. When you allow the human being to operate on its own without any type of rules and regulations, there are greater people who a dollar can be given for you and I and Sony. They say this dollar is for. There are some people who would like to take the dollar and eat the whole thing and not give anything when there is no law to govern that. Men are by nature, and some men and women by nature are corrupt and are wicked and are self-centered. They don't have anything. They don't have any spine for other people. That's the reason why you create laws. That's the reason why the government is supposed to enforce the law. But if the laws are not enforced and people are not willing to go by them, the judiciary, the branch of government that's supposed to impartially interpret the law and granting justice to the citizens, if they are corrupted and they are not willing to do that, they are willing to go by negotiations, they are willing to take bribe from plaintiff and defendant to give justice because of money, we are headed nowhere, and this is where we are. Really, really bad situation. I want to pick back on that thing that Bob talked about when the government stated that they're using their international human rights standard. I also want to agree with sisters to say that this is offensive. It is deeply offending if you say that the United States is trying to use their international human rights standard. What is our standard? We don't have human rights standard? Are we different? Is the international human rights standard different from the standard in Liberia? Are Liberians not human beings? We are using human rights standard. It applies everywhere, not there. Not because it's applied in the United States, in Europe, and other places, it cannot be applied in Liberia. If you do so, you agree with the old saying of the dark continent of Africa, when it was alleged that the black man is incapable of self-governance. You try to prove that. You try to say you're using your international human rights standard to measure me. I'm not even an international human being. I'm a less of a human being. I'm a substandard person. I'm not able to govern myself. I'm corrupt by nature. You say I have an ecosystem wherein corruption is my nature. So do not use your international standard to measure me. You insult yourself. And those of us who are Liberian, we cannot take that insult. That's we got to talk about that. That's totally wrong. Don't say they're using their international human rights standard. The human rights standard is measured everywhere, and every human being is a human being, whether black or white or brown. You can't say that and you think you're going to go free with it. That is wrong. And we as Liberians, we should condemn that statement. There's no international human rights standard that cannot be measured to measure us in Liberia, because we are human beings, we have flesh and blood, and we are part of the global community, and we should hold ourselves accountable. If we are not, if people try to hold us accountable, we should be able to accept it in good faith. Thank you.
All right, let me bring in Cisse. And Cisse, let me add a reading for you here to put context around, and it is on internet freedom. Unlike the previous year, the government did not restrict or disrupt access to the internet during the year. But in July 2019, in the lead up to and during a planned protest, the government blocked, I repeat, the government blocked usage of both Orange and Lone Star Cell, the two mobile networks in the country. When protesters dispersed, access was restored. There were no additional reports. The government censored online content, and there were no credible reports. The government monitored private online communication without appropriate legal framework. Now, this is the one I talked about earlier that I want to bring to you. So the Constitution provides for the freedom of assembly and association, and the government generally respected these rights according to the report. But the key thing I want you to add on is the issue of blocking the entire internet during a protest event. Cisse, how huge is this violation of human rights, especially talking about freedom of press? People could not use the internet.
Well, looking at now how the entire world is connected by the internet, I think suppressing the use of the internet is a gross violation of human rights on so many levels. Look, I was in Liberia at that time. I had gone to fix my late mother's grave, and I had to use VPNs just to be able to get access to the internet to call my wife, who was in the United States, because trying to use data at the time to call directly was very expensive. So she and I had to communicate by Facebook. And in order for me to use that, I had to use VPNs, right? And so people who were doing research, people who didn't even have anything to do with the protest, they were also being denied access to the rest of the world. But here is my thing. I think what the report is speaking about when it says generally the government has been helpful. Excuse me. I'm doing daddy duty, so I apologize.
Yeah.
The government has been.
We all do that.
Has been not too bad on assembly. I think the only assembly that the government has never cracked down on is the assembly of seditions. Every time there is a protest of sedition, it's always peaceful.
Yeah,
it's always peaceful. So the question, the thing that keeps coming back to me is that, well, again, we're supposed to be the alternative. So if the government is saying that, our ecosystem, there's a lot of things in our ecosystem, let's keep in mind that evolution and climate change has affected a lot of ecosystems around everything, right? That's the reason the dinosaurs are extinct today, right? Because the ecosystem changed. So I think human action will help change the ecosystem. And that's where GAME needs to come in, to be that human action that is affecting global climate change in Liberia, political dispensation, to change that ecosystem. Because the CDC-led government has shown us that the ecosystem can change. Because when you look at a protest from Honor Madame Salif to now, the ecosystem under Madame Salif, when it came to protest, when the CDC protested with caskets and every stuff, was not to flog them, right? So now that they're flogging people, the ecosystem has changed. So this ecosystem is changeable, right? And so this is where the alternative, the grassroots alternative movement has to start looking and say, well, we can infuse human action to accelerate climate change, so that this ecosystem that accounts for wanton disrespect of human rights and for extrajudicial killing and for kleptomania, that we can change that. We can infuse human action, into our political dispensation. One last thing I want to say here is, look, there is nothing. The only thing different between this report and what Chris Smith said and the Morba Molu report is that this report was written. The Morba Molu report was a 1 hour plus diatribe of an indictment of the ecosystem. Right? So why the mobile model report, which was an internal report, right? Why did they take that seriously and act on it? Right? Because the mobile model report was not holding us to international standards. It was holding us to our own ecosystem standards.
Gentlemen, this is serious. This is serious. Let me bring Joker in. Joker, we're talking about ecosystem now, right? The mobile model report. It was a recorded, detailed report on the ecosystem, right? So talk to us about this before we come to our final segment on corruption. Go ahead.
That's really amazing. Cesar Goya, the mobile model report dimension is really amazing, and it fits into the conversation so very well. So Dr. Euro's effort to even dismiss the so-called international dimension, where they want to accuse the U.S. of using her own standard to evaluate Liberia governance program. You know, we don't even need to go that far. Just bring in the mobile model dimension report, and then it gets right into it so appropriately. But let me add my voice here to emphasize that what you just read, Ansoni, is the tip of the iceberg in terms of the damning issues in that report. And that is why the report has to be taken seriously. So I like the fact that you were able to highlight, the freedom aspect of it, whether it's freedom of speech or freedom of the press. But that's very, very essential. And there's no way that in a democracy, you will do your best to limit access to information. That is wrong. That is wrong. It's unacceptable. Even our laws don't accept that. Our democratic principles don't accept that. Because in a democracy, the people have to be informed. The people have to make informed decisions. And they have to rely on information from institutions like the media, like other interest groups, civil society organizations. And so information has to flow, and people have the right to be heard, about the way they feel about the governance processes. So let me just say that all of these things come together to contribute to the dysfunctionality that we have in Monrovia. The dysfunction in Monrovia, the incoherence in Monrovia, and by saying in Monrovia, I mean the governance system is really affecting the entire country, the way the entire country is going. There's lack of organization, and so you don't have effectiveness, no economic opportunities. There's limited, they are either limited or non-existent. Social services are either limited or non-existent. The justice system, we're not even talking about independence. The justice system is not even organized. It's not even functional in a way that citizens should feel comfortable to have access. No, the highest bidder takes the day. That's thing you have in our country. And when you have a situation, it is difficult for the country to move. The country will be stagnant and nothing is going to work in the country. That's what you are having. And that's the kind of gloomy picture that the report is painting. The interesting thing about the report, it is a stock. And I will continue to say that it is the stock taken by the US government to help us to change the situation. And we can change that ecosystem, like Cesar said. Game can contribute significantly to disrupting that ecosystem and reorganizing it to make it better, to work for everybody. And some of the steps we are taking is the creation of this platform to be heard. The next thing should be actions that we can take to address that. On the issue of addressing election issue in the country, I think Game was very clear. Game was outspoken, and we took the necessary step to avoid the situation we have today. I'm just giving you a classic example. The referendum, for example, the gross failure of the referendum. We made every effort as an institution to prevent that from happening. The misapplication of resources. Those resources were just given out so that a bunch of it goes back to the government and her accomplices. That's what they did in the process, but it was not actually to deliver any credible referendum to the Liberian people. That's why it failed so badly, so grossly. We advised the government through the legislature. We wrote officially the government. I mean, the legislature was, again, better word, very arrogant. They did not even respond. Nobody referred to game with all those cogent recommendations that we made. Even the National Elections Commission did not get back to game, even in the face of the Supreme Court's ruling, advancing the Elections Commission. We added our voice and said it will be necessary for you not to proceed, so that you save the resources, so that you better organize the referendum to garner the support of the Liberian people and rouse national interest so that people participate, because that's the hallmark of a genuine democracy, the participation of the people. Overwhelming mandate to make a decision in that respect is required when you are having issues and they need to go into a referendum for the people to make decision. So we caution them appropriately. They refuse to listen. So the point I'm making is that you have a dysfunction in Monrovia. So things are not going to work. So those things that you bring are just part of the many issues highlighted in the report that we cannot unload everything today. But the general point we need to strike here as an institution, which we are doing very well, is to be able to hammer home that the issue, the story of the ecosystem, our governance ecosystem, cannot hold any water. Cannot hold any water. We need to dismiss that outrightly, and we need to call out the government and make sure that the government takes the decision that we want her to take, not the decision she wants to take. And part of the disorganization and incoherence is the response. The response is that tells you that it did not even meet the views or opinions of major institutions. Somebody just wrote that thing. It's a table kind of response that they did. When you are a surveyor, you are supposed to do a survey. You don't go to the spot. You don't put the pegs. You don't do anything. You sit down and read the report from your office or your room. It's a table report. That's the kind of response that they did. I'm not even sure that they ascertain the views, the opinions of other major government entities, and for them to discuss collectively to come up with a credible response that would be acceptable to the Liberian people and acceptable to even those who took the stock. That's disrespect to the United States, and that's ingratitude, gross ingratitude to the United States, the U.S. State Department, for even taking our stock and letting us know that's what's happening to us in our country. So I think that response needs to be redone. It has to be done over. It doesn't represent the Liberian people. And GAME is taking this very seriously. We were having some discussions outside of this media conversation about us taking a position. GAME is going to definitely respond to the government's response, and we will take a position on the report that was published by the U.S. State Department on human rights issues in Liberia. We will take a position consistent with our discussions here about how we feel. So it's unacceptable. We want to congratulate, let me say that we have to congratulate the U.S. State Department for the report, for continuously reminding us about things we're doing to our people, and we're not checking to address it. So I believe that, Ansoni, that's part of the issues highlighted in the report. And on the overall, we dismiss the government's response. That's what we have to do. Dismiss the response. It has to be done over.
Thank you, folks. This is GAME TV. GAME TV is the media platform of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. It comes on every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Time, here in my home state of Minnesota. We are going into the final segment of this discussion. We have 10 minutes left. to discuss this segment, gentlemen, that is on corruption. Let me share something and read it quickly so that it can form the basis for the discussion on this final segment. Let me share this quickly, folks. Yeah, we have it, and I will read a little portion of it. This is section 4, corruption and lack of transparency in government. So first, yeah, it talk about Wambodike, the Nigerian national who lied to our entire structure of government that he has obtained Liberian citizenship, being appointed and being confirmed to LACC, and then he was trying to snatch another high-profile position in at the National Election Commission, and then he got caught, hands down. So it's on corruption here. Following an investigation by the LACC on June the 2nd, a grand jury indicted Senate Secretary Namboli Sembe, as well as former officials of the National Investment Commission for defrauding two check investors of approximately $5 million in a gravel production business. Sembe was charged with economic sabotage, theft of property, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. Sembe allegedly used his position to obtain government investment incentive package, which he used unlawfully to import vehicles and equipment for personal gain. On June 29, court officials of Criminal Code C arrested Sembe. The case remained pending before the court at year's end. Imagine that. Then let me read the other short piece. In June 2019, a grand jury indicted 10 persons, including House of Representatives Edward W. Carfire and Josiah M. Court, following an investigation by the LACC into corruption related to construction of the Bond County Technical College. According to the press release, the individuals were accused of using fraud to embezzle approximately 2.7 million in county development funds. According to the media report, former Speaker of the House, Alice Taylor, was listed in documents as owing 7.5% of the company contracted to build the college. Gentlemen, this is just a tip of the iceberg. I don't want to bore you about $25 million now being accounted for. So on the final segment, gentlemen, let's get, if we can get 2 minutes each so we can close the broadcast, I will appreciate that. And let's start with Ball. Ball?
Yes.
The elephant in the room is also part of the ecosystem. Mr. Corruption, these are just few individuals.
Yes, corruption has been part of the ecosystem for a very long period of time, as they are saying, and as we usually see.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a need to actually crack down on corruption.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I see when it comes to the issue of corruption, I look at it from the systemic approach.
Mm-hmm.
If you set up the system, you should be able to use the system. And if you use the system, then the issue of covering government officials, family members, friends, and all of those things will be curtailed. That's one issue. Systems work. So if you set up a system to actually crack down on corruption, will be very, very necessary. Not just by you setting up an anti-corruption bureau alone, but even if the bureau came out with a findings on someone who have been caught in corrupt practices, the person should be prosecuted. But we have a long way to go. That all of my colleagues have been saying. If you have a justice system that is not independent, you cannot crack down on corruption. We see that glaring.
And Bob, the Tyler guy was a candidate in the just in the election, right, Joe?
Of
he
course.
was a candidate.
They call him King Kong.
So you see what we're talking about. Everything.
Corruption King Kong.
Yeah. Everything is actually tied into each other, and that's why we keep talking about good governance. If you have that kind of system put in place where your justice system is independent and people are confronted with these kind of issues, people are found to be guilty of corrupt practices, you take the necessary measure. When you set example on one or two people, brother, people will fall in their place. That's all it takes. Set the example, one or two people, and all other guys who find themselves in the practices will fall in place. But if we always want to be sympathetic, as they call it now, ecosystem, then it's a serious problem, because you will always brush it under the rug. Oh, my member, it happened to Paul and nothing happened. It happened to John in this person's administration, nothing happened. Why do you want to do it with Joseph? That's the kind of thing that's going on. And as long as no one is brought to book to go through the ring and file of the system, it will be a problem. It will continue to be a problem in our country. It's already a problem. It will continue to be a problem in our country. We actually need to look at it from a strategic standpoint, from a systemic approach, and make sure that the judicial system should be able to do their job. So one thing somebody will say is to set up a court that will just prosecute, financial criminals. Set up a court that when the LAC arrest somebody and the person are found guilty, they should have the power to prosecute those people. Because if you send them in the normal judicial system or in the normal criminal justice highway, it get blocked. The president has interest. This minister has interest. This person is a friend of the president and that person's brother is involved. So you just have to give authority to certain dimension to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me bring in Cisse, and Cisse, please bear with me a little bit here. Let me read a few comments as we on the final segment. And folks, we will soon supply a number that you can call. Let's hear from Bobby. I'm watching from Liberia, and many thanks to you guys for the workings, he said. Let's hear from Mr. Logan. It sounds great. I will be delighted to be a part as long as you remain far away from the corrupt political institutions in Liberia, but working to bring about real social justice and equity in Liberia. Liberia got to change. You are on point. We have Sata Muna Johnson. Great discussion, and full disclosure here, she is a member of this institution. Let's hear from Daniel, right, watching from a restaurant in Rehab, Painesville. Gentlemen, people in Liberia are following the discussion. Let's hear from
Dania, let me say something about Dania.
Okay,
that's
go ahead.
Daniel Ankara that you know from LBS, the Liberia Broadcasting System. He hosts one of the biggest shows there.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Joe, for providing that. Let's hear from Francis Beer. In my opinion, the U.S. is financially helping Liberia with U.S. taxpayers' money repeatedly, and they have the right to question the government of Liberia or condemn whatever is going on. If the Liberian government and citizens are mad at thing and think that the U.S. has no right in government, then learn to stand on your own financially and more. All right, let's hear from David Booker, watching from Newark, New Jersey. Hey, my man, go on our website, man, and sign up. This is a national effort, man. Let's hear from Evans. It is so important that Trump's presidency ended. Bad governments around the world were seeing him as a defense shield to perpetuate wrong acts. Let's hear from this July, August, September. I don't know what name is that. Non-CDC government. Or we can't read this kind of comment, gentlemen. I apologize. We need people to be positive here. When you guys will be leaders and stop this man talking around here. Somebody said we're doing the man talking here. Let me hear from this person. The person is saying, you are not accepting call before your guests leave. The person is asking a question. I'll be providing a number very soon. Cisse, we're talking about corruption. That is the final segment. You have 2 minutes yet.
Yep.
Few I just read, but that's just few. You know it.
Yep. So corruption has been a very strong, a large part of our ecosystem, right? So we have to now, as game, like somebody said, we're doing mayor talking. Well, we're now providing that human interaction that is supposed to change that ecosystem. When you have dirty waters around your house and mosquitoes come and infest that area, well, that is the natural ecosystem of the mosquitoes, right? So what do? People usually clean up around the houses and make sure those waters are running. So you get rid of the mosquitoes, because then you introduce man-made actions to change the ecosystem. No, but my biggest thing I want to talk about in political corruption in Liberia is this idea of a conflict of interest, right? You have the Minister of Education running public institution, running his own private institution. You have the Minister of Health having her own private clinic, right? You have members of the House of Representatives who sit on education committees running private universities, right? How do you expect to have transparency? How do you expect that? So for me, the biggest issue is, look, we have to start looking, and again, this has not just been happening on the George Weah-led government, right? Like they said, this has been a part of our political ecosystem. It's been happening for a long time. But I think it's about time that we arrest that system and bring that to end. That we cannot have, but all of this comes from the issue where people just thumb their nose at the laws. Because if people were declaring their assets and telling us where they have interest, then we will know exactly what these people are supposed to be placed in these places in government. So that we know that when the Minister of Education has a public high school competing with a private high school, competing with public schools, that we know that this person should not be Minister of Education. And so to that end, like somebody said, we're just doing mayor talking. No, we're not just doing mayor talking here again. Like Jokai said, we got involved when it came to the referendum. And one of the big pieces that my eye is on as an educator is this new law that is being introduced by Thomas Falah for the revamping of the liberal education system. It is a good idea to revamp the education system, but I think it's in poor spirit, because they have not invited even the Minister of Education staff, or even civil society staff, or teachers union, or other qualified educators around the world to come in and have their input. And that's one of the pieces we're going to be looking at. We'll be coming up with a policy statement on how we can help, not just hurt, but how we can strengthen that, so that people don't come up with laws that end up harming our people instead of helping our people. So to that point, yes, the biggest elephant in our ecosystem has been political corruption. But one of these babies that is eating a lot of our trees right now in that ecosystem is this idea of conflict of interest. And you talked about that incident when you talked about the former speaker owning a 7% share in a construction company that is supposed to build a project that is being funded by the government of Liberia. Right? Classic corruption.
Dr. Uren?
Yes, thank you. I want to start from the point of the political, the corruption King Kong. The King Kong is coming from the point of somebody who was actually nowhere, right? And then all of a sudden begin lawmaker and begin a speaker. And all of a sudden we see the mansion coming up on our highway. And everywhere this person is now a multi-millionaire, right? So the Liberian people say, that's call you political, corruption King Kong, right? Because King Kong, when you watch that movie, the guy in the babu is so much big and taking over the whole forest. Then they say you are a King Kong for corruption because you are so big and ugly. But that's important. Do we have other people of ill getting worth, unexplained worth in Liberia? So then we have many political King Kongs, not just one person. We want to emphasize that. If they have ears, let them listen, because it's a disgrace. The wealth they're enjoying is for the Liberian people. They're going to die and leave. Naked we came, naked shall we go. Why would it benefit you if you take people money and then you make yourself rich? And mothers are dying, children cannot go to school, and you're driving around, you are happy going, or you are get a King Kong, and you are a corruption King Kong. And we want to speak to all the King Kongs so that they are aware of their action and what they're doing is not right. On this issue of corruption, The Bon County College they mentioned, that is close to my house, of course. That's my kinsman from Bon County. I'm from Bon County as well. That college has been going on for a very long time, right? So all the information coming out, these people corrupting the money, 2 point some more million dollars. The question is, what next? What next? When people behave like this in society, what should happen to them? What should we do to them? And that is the failure of the Liberian government and the Liberian people as a whole to be able to take these people to tax. And that's very, very important. And so I would agree with the professor Lumumba that we need some political hygiene in Liberia. And that hygiene is introduced by game. The grassroots alternative movement is the one that's going to institute the political hygiene because as Cesar talked about, you have to disrupt the ecosystem. All right. And he gave a vivid example of mosquitoes causing malaria because of dirty water around your house. You need to clean it. And if you clean that, you have become hygienic. You introduce hygiene into the system to clean it. And so the grassroots alternative movement is here to provide that clear alternative. And then we say by doing, we don't say it just by talking. All right, the records are there for you to see. And I will end up to say that the fish can get rotten from the head. So eventually, we have to get a fish with a clear head so that when that hair is not rotting, we make sure we have a clean fish that we can enjoy. The closest statement on this point, hand to a wise is quite sufficient. A dirty hand cannot bathe another person. Bathe yourself and be clean, then you bathe other people.
Thank you. Let me bring in Joe. And Joe, before you speak, there's a comment here I want you to jump on a little bit from Samuel Galamon. This is one of the best, if not the best, in my view, because all of you guys know the issue. Well done, brothers. Keep up the good, savor discussion. Joe?
Right. I think that's a great commendation. And those are people that we definitely establish contact with. Sam, we'll talk to him. Sam, we told you about how to get to us. Go to our website. And so you want to put it up. Maybe if Sam is still watching, he can see it. www.gamliberia. That's GAM Liberia.org. 1 million ways to get to us. Sam, we really appreciate the fact that you follow and with interest in the conversation. And we appreciate your commendation. Thank you. Let me say here, let me start this way. Because I don't know if I'm going to be able to say more than what Cesar and Dr. Ure have already said, about corruption and all the corruption king kongs that we have in Liberia that actually we need to. And when I talk about disrupting the political ecosystem in our country, that's what I meant. Game has to be that cleanser. We need that cleansing, definitely. And it has to start with certain people, certain institutions. Definitely game is committed to that. But let me start this way. George Weah, from the time he ventured into the political waters, he declared his asset. He was not worried about his family's security. He did it in 2005. And he also did it when he was running for a seat in the Senate. He declared his assets. And those assets, you want to access them, you can do that. He also declared it in 2011. He did so in 2017. Joshua was not worried about the security of his family when he did it. But now, as President Joshua is worried to declare his assets because of the security of his family, that is an indicator of corruption. Because if the people cannot know what you have before taking seat, elected to any public office, definitely it's going to be difficult for them to make a judgment in terms of what you had, what you own, what was your wealth before coming on, and what you have acquired. So that's something that needs to be addressed. But how do you address it when that's the head of the fish? Like Dr. Ure mentioned, that's the head of the fish. The head of the fish is already rotting. How can the office of the president has a budget allocation that is far more than the allocation of government ministries and agencies? How can the office of the first lady, gets an allocation in the budget, in the national budget, that is more than some government agencies that are supposed to be providing services to the Liberian people. Yeah. So that's a complete corrupt practice just by budgetary allocation and dispensation of funds to those institutions of interest. That is corruption. That did not start now, but they made a commitment to change it. That has not changed. That is yet to change. And the list is very long for the period under review. I don't want to go back to the story of the political ecosystem, but the period under review, the list is long. This government that the U.S. State Department took stock of was stealing funds that were being provided by partners, their own partners, who were supposed to support them to carry out some of the services that they did not have resources for. They were taking their own money. Partners had to caution them. I don't have a better way of putting it. I'm using the word stealing because that's what you do. Because some of us have experiences working in that respect with partners, having the escrow funds, having these joint funds that you have to go to. I'll give you a classic example. When I worked for the Elections Commission, we had this electoral basket fund that was set up because the government did not have the money at the time. We had just ended the war. So this 2-year electoral cycle project was established. And the government was supposed to contribute $12 million in recurring expenditure that would just go to basically remuneration, salaries, honorariums. And then the partners collectively contribute $26 million that will go straightly into elections operation. And so a fund was established, a basket fund was established based on the understanding of the project. So the 26 million plus the 12 million, total 38 million for the electoral cycle period to do the elections and then to do feedback after the election and to do an analysis of what to do to improve the electoral system. So were we supposed to go to that basket fund and start stealing the money that the partners were putting in there? The Swedish government, the German government, all of them were putting in there. That's exactly what happened during this period. Some of the funds established, set up, pool funds by partners, the government was going there and taking funds from there without the acquiescence or consent of their partner in the process, which are the international partners. They had to call them out. They had to call their attention to that. That's not only disgraceful, but that's terribly corrupt. That's for the period under review. 25 million to mop up excess liquidity. We know about that. The report, their own report was so horrible. Their report was so horrible. People who they claim that they gave money to, their own report. Even the finance minister was rejected. He was told to go back and redo his own report when he faced the Senate.
Joe, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I will appreciate if you can comment on this. This is the 2020-2021 budget. You are talking about, allocation of money. If you see the counties there, each county got 200,000, but the first lady got 700,000. Each lawmaker is making more than 200,000 a year, but the county each of them represent, they give 200,000. And you're talking about the president making pretty close to 300 million as his budget, but each county is being given 200,000 for what they call county development fund. And you remember the president went to the county on a county tour, and the people supposed to celebrate him for him taking 3 million and giving each of them 200,000 on it. Can you talk about that?
Look, you haven't said anything different from the point I was trying to make. This is corruption by definition, and this is protocol. Because the allocations that are made in the budget are so unfair, are so unjust, and they are responsible. Like I've always referred to what's happening as a dysfunction, because individuals getting more money than institutions, so services are not provided. People are denied. There's no access to quality and affordable education. Cesar Goya is here. You can delve into that. It's shameful. There's no access to economic opportunities. Farming, People can't find the implements. People can't find the seeds. They can't find the rice. They can't find no access. Job creation, you don't have it. There is no private-public partnership approach to creating jobs, because that's what government is supposed to do, to empower the private sector to be able to create more jobs so that citizens get jobs. Because government is not supposed to be the principal employer. But that's not possible in the country. So everybody looking for job, no job. So the issue here, corruption is endemic. We understand, but there was a commitment to change the situation, and it's not changing. And I was making a list, when you came in with that intervention, and the list I was trying to make points strictly to the period under review. Those things happened. Vani Sherman was hooked by the Magnitsky Act. Will more people be hooked? That's why I said we should be a little bit optimistic going forward with this whole reporting coming on the margins of Chris Smith's position. Can we push? Can game go ahead further to be able to have a position on the Chris Smith position, to have a position on the report, so that we can address these economic crime issues that are corruption, the political crimes issues that are corruption in the country? Yes, we can certainly do that. The list is long. They talk about the mop-up. You know how much went into that? You know how many billions of Liberian dollars were printed before Weah came in? Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and her team ate part of it. George Weah came, his team ate the remaining portion of it. Now they went ahead and allocated to themselves $25 million. Nothing came out of that. There's no report, no accountability. Nobody is asking questions. What's happening to the justice system? That's what Cesar Goya talked about, the independence. That's what Boyd Johnson talked about, people not being committed, very unfair. And you don't have a system in place to track these things and to apply justice. We don't have it. We don't have the tools in place. We have the tools in place in terms of the policies, but we don't have the people to implement them, because they are the ones allocating to themselves all of these resources at the disadvantage of the Liberian people who continue to languish in poverty. That's what happened in our country. So there's corruption. We don't have to make the list today. It's going to be very long, very, very long. But one optimism I have is that there is an institution called GAME that is committed to taking this head on in a way that will bring some changes in the system. Our position, our recommendations may just help at the end of the day. So I just like to say, this is a great opportunity for the Liberian people. And if you are watching us, you are interested in becoming a part of this movement, visit our website. We are committed to change in Liberia. The issue about the ecosystem is something we can break. It's a tradition we can break. It's a chain we can break, and we can have a renewed sense in terms of going forward, addressing the issue of corruption in our society. We can start with the little things that we do at home, the things we do in our institutions, and then holding the government accountable. That is why I've always emphasized that there is a need for us to be able to take on actions that will position the Liberian people appropriately for this task ahead. We have to be able to teach the Liberian people what their rights are, what their responsibilities are, what their roles are in the governance process. Because in the absence of those three key aspects of governance, it's going to be difficult for things to change in Liberia. Citizens continue to see government as a group of people who are supposed to do them favor, which is the negative mindset that we need to break, we need to address. Citizens feel that they have limited or no role in the decisions that are made to affect their lives as a people. We need to address that negative mindset. Citizens believe that they have limited or no rights to hold their government accountable for the wrongs that they do to them. That is a negative mindset that we need to break. And if we can break these negative mindsets, then we are able to address much of the issues, many of the issues that we are confronted by. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you, Joe. Gentlemen, time is our enemy now. We can have this conversation on and on, and I see that we all want a better Liberia, and that is what the institution is about. I will take 30 seconds closing statement. We're gone 2 hours now, so I'll take 30 seconds of closing statement, and so we can wrap this edition up. We can have another opportunity next Saturday to discuss again. So I will start with Mr. Boyd Johnson for his parting statement here, closing statement. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Anthony. My closing statement is that we at GAME will actually forge ahead looking at this report as a set of data that can be used to guide our involvement, our intervention in the country. We're not just going to sit by and see things go the way it's supposed to. This data will be applied in our programs that we are trying to initiate months to come, and some of the kind of intervention we intend to carry out in the country. So I just want to urge the listener out there that are looking at this kind of conversation to be mere talks, that they should look up for us. They are going to see our actions, not just in talking, but both in the kind of plan we intend to implement. Thank you very much.
All right. Dr. Ure?
I thank you very much, and Sonny, thank you to all those that follow Game TV, all those that follow our Facebook activity. We say thank you for tuning in today. We discussed the issue. There has to be a way forward. Some of all eyes of the view that Liberia is a great nation. Despite all of the difficulties we are faced with today, that country is a great nation. If we start to go into the history of the country, how it has stood up to be a nation up to this point. The people are frustrated, but we want to make sure that there's always hope, because if we lose hope, it is the end of the game. And that's why the grassroots alternative movement is here to let you know that change is coming, and not just the usual change that people promise and then they don't live up to it. The grassroots alternative movement is here to offer you some concrete changes, changes that you will have greater voice as a citizen, changes that you'll go to school and your children's lives will be improved, changes that every child born on the soils of Liberia will have the ability to attain his or her highest God-given potential. That is it. And we are here to tell you that. And follow our activities. We ask you to join the movement, because this will not be done by one person or two persons. Good people have to join forces. If we continue to sit by idly and allow the corruption King Kongs to rule our country, we'll continue to cry. And for some of us, we don't want to be spectators. We want to be involved. History can judge us as participants or witnesses or spectators. But it is not time, and that's why we are here dissecting the issues and telling you our view. The grassroots alternative movement, we're asking you to join us. Let's join forces. When all good forces come together, we'll change the country. We'll go above the recent one. I don't want to introduce another topic, but the third lane that I heard lawmakers were creating third lane for themselves. It's a nonsense. We cannot allow that to happen. You cannot create another lane for yourself because you are a lawmaker. I mean, how to describe it? It's a total nonsense. Sorry for using the word, but we call it as it is. It is a nonsense. But we are here to give you the alternative that those type of things will not happen, and will not leave it go unchecked, and will get involved with it. Thank you very much.
All right. Let me bring in Cecil.
Yeah, so it's always rewarding to be with with great people. That's why I told you guys I joined this movement, because I've seen the minds that are involved in this. I at GAME, and especially personally me, I am not pro CDC. I am not pro CPP. I am not pro ALP. I'm not pro NPP or pro UP. I am pro Liberia, and because I'm pro Liberia, that's the reason I am here, giving you what I know. My country of birth blessed me, and my ancestors blessed me, and by their prayers and intervention, I'm here on these shores. So it is incumbent upon me to give back to my country what I've learned, and that's the reason we're here. We are going to continue to interact with government and opposition to make sure that we can proffer solutions to our people that benefits everybody. When the education system works, it works for everybody. Opposition, no position, all position alike. When the security sector works, it works for everybody, regardless of where you are. And I think that's where game is coming from. There was a reason that game interacted with the major players before the referendum was issued, so that we could have a check and say, look, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? How about we look at it this way? And I think that's why we're here. So we're inviting everybody, whether you're a sedition, whether you're a CPP or COP or whatever, that as long as you're pro-Liberia, as long as you're foreseeing a change in our ecosystem in Liberia, this is not about hating somebody or loving another person. This is about just loving the nation that God has given us, Liberia, and trying to find a way to move that country forward. So it's going to be with everything. Whenever legislations are introduced, like I was talking about the Thomas Fala legislation regarding education, I think it's a great idea to reform our education system, but I think it's a bad idea to go through it without having qualified minds at the table to discuss some of the pitfalls. And I think that's where game is coming from. So I don't want people to think this is an opposition movement. This movement is no opposition to the ecosystem. It is not opposition to a political party or to a ruling establishment. It is pro-Liberia, and that's why we're inviting everybody to come on who love our dear country, Mama Liberia. Appreciate that.
All right. Joe?
What a great message. I think that should be the closure. I think that should be the closure of the
all right.
That was really excellent. Again, we are optimistic of change in Liberia. It's possible. We can do it. We are humans like humans in other places where they're doing better, and we can also do the same. I'm very optimistic about that. I want you viewers to watch out for the next issue we're going to pick up in education. An expert here is a member of GAME, Cesar Goya. He's going to be leading us. We are highly interested in that. We should be able to come up with an institutional policy statement on the education reform introduced by Thomas Fala. We are interested. Some of us work in the education sector too. And we know that there are reforms that are supposed to take place to make sure that we can have the sector effective and working efficiently for all Liberians. You can look forward to that. Also in the oil industry, there was a law passed before, and part of that law, Article 36 to be specific, talks about the Citizens Fund. We know that George Weah and his team repealed that aspect of the law, and now they are supposed to be awarding benefits to companies of their interests. So we are also looking into that keenly. What again will pick up that individually, or we will do it as a coalition with other institutions. We'll let you know. We just want to let you know that we are following, and these are the means by which we want to disrupt the ecosystem and be able to reorganize it so that it works for everybody in our country. Thank you very much. Look forward to another exciting conversation.
Thank you. I'm sure you listeners enjoy this panel discussion of the Grassroots Alternative Movement. This is Game TV. Game TV comes here every Saturday, 11 Eastern, 10 Central, talking about AM. We want to say thank you so much for joining our broadcast. I will read these 2-3 comments, and then we will close the broadcast. This one is from Dr. Baton Kula. Let's change the way our society is oriented from cradle to grave, he writes. He continues here. Any societies which tells children big men can lie and doesn't encourage kids to question authority when they are wrong is a society which turns out like Liberia. And this one is from Rudin Skeva. That country is hugely challenged on every front. I pray that the eyes of every one of you be enlightened to see how hugely it's challenged. Powerful comments from Liberians following this broadcast. Folks, this is how we will come to the end of this special edition of Game TV. And we will let you know, as always, we come here Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time and 10 a.m. Central Time. our team song will close the broadcast. We'll see you next time. If you want to be part of this movement, if you like what you see, if you are encouraged by what you see, the way to get to us is easy. It's on the screen right there. www.gameliberia.org. You can be able to get to us. Now, our team song to close the broadcast, and we say to you on behalf of all the membership and leadership of the Grassroots Alternative Movement, we want to say thank you for watching Game TV. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, folks.